It absolutely did not disappoint. We're off and running in the summer run, and the Corn Belt was a hit.
Well, the first major summer video auction for Superior Livestock has come and gone, and if the Corn Belt Classic is any indication, tell you what, folks, this cattle market is going to continue to write stories that few of us thought were ever possible. Historic prices, continuing to see incredible demand as buyers competing for these calves all across the country. But beyond these headlines, what's also driving this market? What are some of these fundamentals? What management decisions are buyers rewarding in this market today?
When we talk about value added, now we've moved back into primarily when we're talking about the vaccination program and the weaning program that these ranchers are using and producers are using. We've kind of gone, quote unquote, back to the basics. Health first and foremost, and then obviously genetics goes hand in hand with that as well.
This week, Ballou with Superior Livestock joins us to break down the fundamentals behind today's cattle market, discuss where producers can still capture added value, and then we'll go through region by region across the country with results from the Corn Belt Classic. That's all coming up on this week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Hang on to your hats on this one as we go through the results of the Corn Belt Classic on today's show. Ballou with Superior Livestock will be our guest. Hi, everyone. Justin Mills here, your host of the Working Ranch Radio Show. Glad to have you with us on our program today as we have a lot in store for today's show. Hey, guess who is stopping by? He hasn't been by in a long while, but the Captain Tim O'Byrne, editor of Working Ranch Magazine, will be in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents. And, of course, we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our longrangeweather.com. Hey, just want to remind you as well that if you do have to step away from the radio for some unforeseen reason here today, or you want to go back and listen to certain parts that we talked about, you can find all of our shows by going to workingranchradio.com. That is our direct podcast site. You can subscribe to our show from there. Or if you are an avid podcast listener and you have your own podcast list that you listen to from time to time, you can search, whether it's through Spotify, Pandora, any of the majors, any of the minor podcast providers, search Working Ranch Radio Show, and you will find us there. Hey, and here's one other outlet, agriamerica.com. If you've not checked them out, you can find our show as well as other ag-related podcasts, radio shows that are there as well. So a lot of ways you can go back and listen to our shows. And if you are a regular listener, you're going to know that oftentimes many of our shows are not really dated. Now, today's show, where we're going to be talking about the cattle market's probably going to have a little bit of a date to it, but for the most part, a lot of our topics are topics you can go and listen to at any point in time. So if you haven't been able to get caught up on some of the shows and you're now in the tractor because you're starting to cut hay or you're a swather or whatever that might be, and you can get caught up, you can find all of our shows. Another thing, leave us a comment, rating, or a review. We appreciate that. And if you would like to get a hold of me, you can send me an email. My email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm just like you all. If I don't get back to you right away, it's because I'm busy. It is a busy time of the year for all of us, and I will at some point. In fact, I had somebody reach out to me, and it was about a month or so later when I finally got back to them, but it was something we ended up doing a show on. So please feel free, if you got questions, whatever that might be, you can sure reach out and get a hold of me. Hey, the latest issue of Working Ranch Magazine is out. It is the Summer 2026 edition. As always, I hate to sound like a broken record, but kind of always say this whenever I get a new issue, is just always interested to see the topics that are in there, because it's always very applicable to those of us, whether you're in a working ranch environment or whether you're somebody that was or likes to just know what's going on in the ranching world. A lot of the topics, a lot of the articles that are in there are very relevant to that. One I wanted to highlight specifically, I thought it was interesting because for our own ranch operations, we've been using a drone since about 2018. And so in this particular issue, Addie Brown has an article under the That's Improvement section of drone technology and how that's being used in ranching. So if that's something that's kind of perked your interest from time to time and you want to read more about it, check out the latest issue of Working Ranch magazine. And on that, in fact, you'll also see an ad for Tank Toad. That's kind of how we've been monitoring our tank systems here on the X-Ring Ranch, and our other ranch up north for several years is Tank Toad, when we can keep track of our the water levels in our tank, water level in our cistern tank as well. And when that goes down, it'll flip on the well and turn that on. So a lot of great advantages there that help us keep an eye on things without having to put gas through a pickup or side by side or whatever that might be, of ways you can do things from a remote standpoint. If you want to find out more information, you can go to their website at www.tanktoad.com. And if you are not a regular subscriber to Working Ranch magazine, it's pretty easy to subscribe by going to workingranchmag.com. Or another way, you can pick up not only a current copy, but sometimes you can even pick up some back issues that are still on the rack if you stop by your local Tractor Supply store. And if you've been following along, you know I'm going in somewhat alphabetical order as we do shout outs here. So a shout out to the Tractor Supply store in Clovis, California, and also in Clovis, New Mexico, in Cody, Wyoming, and in Colby, Kansas. Well, let's get into our program here today. And joining us is Ballou. He is with Superior Livestock. He is their auction block manager and also the manager of the country page and a Superior rep there out of Southwest Oklahoma. And Bailey, good to have you here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thanks for having me. We're excited to visit with you about the market.
You bet. Well, I know a lot of folks were watching that Corn Belt Classic that took place here recently and looking at that as it really kind of starting to set the tone for what we expect and hope to see in this market for this coming year. And in fact, it did do that, didn't it? I mean, it really, as you and I were talking before we even started, said, you know, hitting some historic highs. You're just kind of wondering how long is that going to last?
Yeah, sure. We always anticipate this summer run, and rightfully so this year, along with last year, as we've seen this market continue to climb to historic highs. And like you said, it just absolutely did not disappoint. We're off and running in the summer run, and the Corn Belt was a hit.
You bet. I want to, before we start getting in and breaking down, and we're going to have that opportunity to go through some of these regions a little bit and talk a bit about that. But before we do that, let's talk some of the fundamentals. I know we've definitely hit on this over the last couple of years. We do see a shrinking cattle market, kind of the perfect storm out there with where we're seeing declining cattle numbers, and beef demand continues to be very favorable in that. But from your guys' perspective, as you look at this, I want you to work us through some of the fundamentals that you think is really behind this. Again, some of the things we've already talked about, but in addition to that, what are some of the fundamentals that you feel is really keeping this market where it's at?
I think first and foremost, you're going to want to talk about genetics and quality of what the product that we've been able to produce and how much better it's gotten over the last probably 5 to 10 years, but namely the last 5 years. The advancements that we've seen in these genetics in the cattle that we're producing, putting on the table, has just really been able to afford us some luxuries of home front demand and then also export demand. Our product is in high demand right here at home and across, abroad. So as long as we're talking about genetics, sure, we're short of head count. Cow herd is obviously down. But when we look at the amount of pounds of meat that we're producing, genetics has allowed us to kind of keep that number a little bit higher as far as the ratio goes of cattle loss versus meat produced loss. We've been able to continue to hang a lot of meat on those hooks, even though we're not running the hooks as fast as we were.
As you talk about hanging more meat on the hooks, that's definitely been something that we've seen. We've seen these carcass weights coming up, and we look at some of the numbers of the pounds of beef that we're producing with the amount of head that we have versus where we were at a few years ago, and these carcass weights continuing to be high, and it looks like we could keep going a little higher.
I think you're going to see them go higher until the packer tells them that they're not going to stand it anymore.
Okay.
It's the same rule. That's how kids learn. That's we break the rules until we get spanked. So we're going to continue to make them bigger until we get spanked by the packers.
That's a good point. A good point on that. You first, right out of the gate, talked something that wasn't really in the vein of what I was thinking about, but it made a lot of sense. And that was, you said, genetics has played a big difference in where we're seeing from one of the fundamental standpoints. And we're seeing, in addition to that, the amount of choice and prime that we have in our industry now compared to where we were at, and the lesser volume of select really does testify to the fact that the genetics in our market is playing a big part, not only from what we as producers are doing, but further out to the consumer.
Oh yeah, without question. And that's, if anything good came out of 2020 and COVID, that was it. We were selling grills and charcoal and pellets to everybody in their neighborhood, and everybody was in their backyard grilling, and really found out just how much our product had gotten better, how much more tender and tasty, and all the things that we've really strived to do over the last decade or more. But like I said again earlier, the last 5 years, the advancement in these genetics and the meat and the carcasses we're putting out has just been tremendous.
Yeah. Bailey, no doubt when you're out on the road and you're talking to producers out there, a lot of questions I'm sure you get taught or asked that deal with just the news in our industry, various different things that are in the industry. And so from that standpoint, let's talk through some of those kind of things. For example, one of the things, and this was something that I'd mentioned it, or it had come up in one of our previous shows, that with the numbers of our total herd size in the United States, we're seeing some atrophy in the industry in terms of hook space. Some of that, I know there's some hook spaces increase in terms of smalls, but some of the bigs. So in regard to some of those conversations, when you hear things like, well, this packer's shutting down this plant, or potentially going to look at that, and maybe this feedlot's going to shut down or close, shut the water off to those pens and those kinds of things. Talk with me through that, the atrophy in some elements of our industry due to the declining amount of just pure numbers.
Sure. And I think when we look at that, we've got to look at what the packers are trying to plan as well. Mm-hmm. They can manipulate with a lot of this market and value of that market with their change speed. You can close a small regional plant. You can close a smaller plant. Of some of these corporates can close some of their smaller plants and maybe speed up their change speed in some of the larger plants. I think they've got a really good grasp of what it is that they're wanting to do speed-wise to help regulate that supply, mm-hmm. if that makes sense. Obviously, it's something that we want to, I don't want to say worry about, but we always have our eye on, because it wasn't very long ago that a small fire in a plant just took our market down, mm-hmm. for a week or two. So, obviously we look very closely at what these packers are doing and what these plants are doing as far as who's closing, and the water situation is always an issue as well. But like I said before, I think demand is the biggest driver. We have great demand, and it's something that they have to do. They have to keep the chains moving, whether they're going to regulate that by the speed or the amount of plants they're going to do that. They're going to continue to move these cattle through the plant and put them into the retail sector.
Yeah. Bailey, when I think about where we're at with our market, I'm appreciative and thankful for what we as ranchers are getting from what we're selling off the ranch, and that's all good and fine. But I also know that down the chain, down the line, those folks also have to make some element of profit in what they're doing. And sometimes, volume can cover some of the margins for some folks in that, and I get that. But as you look at it from your perspective, you've been in the cattle business an awful long time. As you look down the line from the ranch gate and going to the next guy in the line and further down than that, how are they doing?
Well, that's always such a fluid situation. The truckers need to make money hauling cattle. We see these fuel prices go up. They try to go up on their price a little bit to go with fuel, and then fuel will come down. They can stay up for a little while to be a little bit more profitable. I think we see that all the way across the board. All the hands that take a little bit off the top of these cattle everywhere they go, whether they're going on a truck, they're going through a sale barn, they're going through a vet, or a drug salesman. There's so many different elements that have to make profit and get a little piece of each animal. It is amazing how many people are employed by that chain, mm-hmm. that supply chain.
Yeah. And part of the reason I ask that, I say that with knowing that, again, that we as ranchers need to make the profit that we need to make, and in all of that. But at the same time, if the feeder's not making it work, and the next guy down the line, or the guy buying the yearlings, and then the feeder, and then of course ultimately the packer, and then the grocer that's getting it to the consumer, as you said, there's a lot of different fingers in that to try to get some profit in that. And I know at some point, if it gets pinched in other places down the line, it's eventually going to work itself down to the rancher. So that was kind of where my question was stemming from.
Oh, sure. And that's something the rancher and the producer has fought forever. Mm-hmm. And finally, we're profitable. And like you said, how do you see that looking out the gate and going down the road? Maybe you're asking, when does that backlash come? When do we see that spring back and start pushing back towards us, where as producers, we're not going to be given that upfront price that we've been given here the last 18 to 24 months and been very profitable. I think we continue to wait on the retail sector and see when people are going to stop buying it. Mm-hmm. And we just haven't seen that quite yet. We keep telling us, that we're getting close, and we're to a point where the retail, your average buyer is going to stop buying beef. But every time we look at the reports, our market share we're not giving up any market share there. And if we are, it's not by much. Mm-hmm. We're still able to hold that market share there. Beef is in high demand. So to answer the question, I would say it no time soon, in my opinion. Yeah. And also, I think another thing that we want to talk about when we talk about that is our product has become so marketable that we don't have to worry just about the local grocery stores, but our export demands are going to allow us to continue to trade this beef at a high figure. Yeah,
and that's the export deal. Definitely something that we need to remember to keep accountable in our industry. It is a major component to that. All right, Bailey, let's take a break here. We've yet to really get into the details of the Corn Belt Classic, and that's what we want to do. Coming up next, I want to take a break here, and when we do that, before we jump into some of the regions, I want to talk about some of the program type deals, how that's working, and what you're finding is getting that premium on some of these calves, and talk through some of that kind of stuff, because every year we always talk about, how are the program cattle doing? How are the, weaned or not weaned, and all those kinds of conversations that we all come up with as we're making those decisions. So I want to talk about that when we come back. Okay.
Thanks.
Your pasture is under attack. Yeah, horn flies. They're wreaking havoc on your herd, dealing damage to your cattle's weight, and in turn, that does affect your bottom line. That's why you need a solution in your arsenal that can withstand an attack. Alticid IGR is the first and proven feed-through that is battle-tested as an effective hornfly management product, delivering the defense needed to keep your herd productive and your profit strong. Win the battle for your cattle. Learn more at AlticidIGR.com.
Imagine keeping your cattle exactly where you want them, while being able to tap into insights powered by a collar and an app. No Fence is the world's first virtual fencing system for grazing livestock. From the palm of your hand and delivered with GPS technology, you can set and move pasture boundaries, gain insight into grazing patterns, receive reduced animal activity alerts, and more. No wires, no posts, just empowered grazing that supports healthier land and your herd goals. 10,000 plus producers globally already trust No Fence. Explore the possibilities at nofence.com.
All right, Bailey, let's jump now into getting into and diving into the details from that Corn Belt Classic. A lot of folks watching this market all across the country, as you had said at the very beginning, does kind of set the tone for our industry and what we hope and anticipate and what's going to happen through the rest of that summer. So with that in mind, I want to, before we start jumping into some of these, and if we have to, and if you feel like we need to do it by region, I'm good to do that. But I think the question that we always come up with, especially right now, we're a ways off from really calves leaving the ranch per se. Maybe some yearlings are leaving, but the calves that are spring calves aren't yet. We start looking at, okay, what are the decisions we need to make, from a preconditioning program to weaning, not to wean? We've also got folks that are in some pretty dry conditions. Do we need to pull them calves off and sell a little more flyweights than we had in the past and not those heavy calves? So let's kind of work through that and kind of guide us through that discussion, and maybe starting first at some of the program type cattle and how they were doing.
Yeah, sure. We have pulled calves forward the last several years, and it just seemed like every year over the last 3 years that I've really been involved in this country page and the livestock auction here as well at Superior, we're pulling these calves forward because the market is so good. And it just, what we saw, for a really good example, a lot of these fall delivery calves out of the north, fall delivery balling calves that it really kind of took traction last year, right around the 1st of June. We saw that take off. This year in April and in May, we were off and running and pulling these cattle forward. That's another reason we get so excited about the Corn Belt, is because when we see our guys pulling these cattle forward on the country page, those prices are really good, and those producers are taking advantage of that. But I'm always excited to see it go to auction, because nothing beats that auction. Whenever those guys start competing at auction for those calves, we hit a whole nother gear. So whenever we start selling these things in April and May out in front for fall delivery, I had great anticipation for the Corn Belt and the rest of the summer run. When we talk about some value added, for years and years, over the last several years anyways, value added has been, we just continue to add programs, third-party verification programs. Of course, Agent Source is probably one of our oldest ones that we see out there. And then we have the, IMI Global and Beef Cares, Ranchers Connecting Ranchers, and these different third-party verification programs that come out and want to offer GAP and Beef Cares, where your food comes from. Those are things that and natural, certified natural plus, NHTC, non-hormone treated cattle, things that the last several years when we talked about value added, those were kind of the programs that we were talking about. And we were seeing tremendous premiums there in those cattle. And I think primarily because of what that allowed us to do in the export sector. As our markets climbed, and we've seen the packer become less and less profitable, and we get a little bit of pushback in that retail sector, some of those programs don't have quite the premium that they did the last several years because the initial cost is just so high. We're seeing a lot of those program type cattle, the NHTCs and naturals, that these folks are buying and knocking them out of the program just to run them on grass. They're going to implant them and whatever, because they hold such great value. They're going to respond so well to an implant or to whatever feed program you put them in front of, because they're primed to do it. So I think when we talk about value added, now we've moved back into primarily when we're talking about the vaccination program and the weaning program that these ranchers are using and producers are using. We've kind of gone, quote unquote, back to the basics. What we really, really need as a backgrounder or a stock or feeder guy is health. Health first and foremost, and then obviously genetics goes hand in hand with that as well. But value added, in my opinion, has kind of reverted back to some of those weaning and vaccination programs are about as important as anything that we're seeing out there as far as value and premium goes.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I hadn't thought about it that way. I guess in my own mind, I was seeing that maybe not the premium in some of those, what we were thinking program cattle were, just as you stated there, and knowing that the amount of money these guys are paying per head, a live calf, is extremely important. And so it gets back, the health and whatever can be done to make sure that you're sending a healthy calf to the next guy is going to pay.
No, without question, it just becomes a game of efficiency. And so the healthier those calves are when we get them, and the healthier we keep them throughout that chain. And, and every time we have to doctor one or take one to the sick pen, we take off what his top end potential is. So every time we can avoid that, we talk about these large carcasses, we give that animal just that much more opportunity to achieve his absolute, pinnacle. Yeah.
I don't know if you have got some of this information just right off the cuff here, but because I know sometimes it's a matter of kind of tabulating that, in the next month following the sale. But let's talk these VAC programs. We got VAC 30, VAC 45, VAC 60, those kind of protocols that can be done in that. Do you have some rough ideas of the value in that? I mean, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here a little bit because some of that stuff doesn't get tabulated, or it's just now being tabulated. But just from your own feel, you were there on the auction block, you saw the market going on. What's your feel on some of those programs?
Again, I think we kind of revert back a little bit to some older ways as far as. Obviously, you want them with the vaccinations. It's VAC 34 plus on an unweaned calf, at least 2 rounds of that modified live and 3 rounds of modified live. but demand has become so good that we're not seeing quite that premium there between a VAC 24 and a VAC 34 calf. If they've had a round of shots and they're genetically sound, a calf that they think they can keep healthy and grow, they're coming to the front to buy them. And then we get into a game that it's a dollars per head game. These guys want to try to buy calves or buy cattle that fit a dollars per head that they can afford. And sometimes those cattle fall out of the programs that they have always bought or made themselves hold that line in the past. Only buy 45-day wean cattle with 3 rounds of shots. Well, when you start talking about the dollars per head, now they've got to buy a VAC 24 or a VAC 34 unweaned calf to fit that dollars per head mold.
Yeah. Anything catch you by surprise in this first video sale to kind of get the 2026 season off? Anything just kind of like, wasn't anticipating that? I
would say it would be these fall delivery 6 and 7 weight calves. And I know I keep harping on genetics and how much better we've gotten, but with that comes larger calves. Where we used to deliver 4 and 5 weight calves in September to November unweaned, now they're 6 and 7 weight calves. I mean, just big ballers that are just absolutely got it all. And so I anticipated a lot of heavy 5 weight to maybe a mid 6 weight calf in the Corn Belt. And I knew that market was going to be good. What probably caught me off guard the most was how many of them weighed 650 to 7 1/4 for a fall delivery ball and calf. Just lot after lot after lot of big calves, and the amount of dollars per head that they were bringing was just phenomenal.
Yeah. In previous years, those lightweight calves, and when I say lightweight, I'm going to put them at 450 to 500, maybe 5 1/4 at the top end of that. You could get one, those were bringing what those 575 to 6.5 weights were bringing. Any variation on that you saw in that were those light calves not selling in comparison to maybe the next weight class up?
No, I think you nailed it right there. That's it's always amazing whenever you look at, and we work our way, obviously we sell the lighter cattle first, and we kind of work our way into the heavier ones, and everybody's always running their calculator, seeing how many dollars per head that lot was from those calves.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my gosh, they were $2,500. And then you would go into the next weight and they're going, oh, they only brought 2,550 or they only brought 26. And you say only.
Yeah.
But now we did the exact same thing this year, selling 5 weight calves for 27, 28, 2,900. And then we roll into those 6 weight calves and you go, oh, they're only bringing 2,900. You're like you said, it's demand. And then people want to buy that calf. You give yourself an opportunity to grow yourself into a profit on some of these light calves. People that have bought those calves for years and years and years, and that's the program that they run. They can own that calf long enough to run him on grass and get cheap gain anymore. Or if they've got cheap feed, they can use cheap feed around to grow that calf into a profit. What we're seeing now on these light calves, and the longer you own them, these dollars per head figures, you get into interest rates that eat into your profits in a hurry. So that's a whole nother factor to throw in there on top of some of these light calves that you used to be able to own them for 18 months, and you look at what you pay in interest on 18 months on that calf that costs 27 to 2,900 first cost. That gets pretty hairy pretty quick.
Yeah. All right, let's take another break, Bailey. When we come back, let's go region by region if we can and look at this. We're not going to get in the nitty-gritty details of everything, but I think it'll give us a basis of where we were at for folks. So if you're in a particular region, you kind of know where things are at. So we'll do that when we come back, okay?
Okay.
Agoro Carbon works with farmers and ranchers to implement practices that promote soil health and add a new revenue stream. Now, when you work with Agoro Carbon, you'll gain a partner that provides flexible payments and local agronomic expertise for your row crop or your range or even your pasture operations. Partnering with Agoro Carbon is an investment in your land and your ranch's future. Get started today at agorocarbon.com. We're back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Ballou with Superior Livestock. He is their auction block manager and also manages the country page, a Superior rep. They're out of southwestern Oklahoma. Bailey, let's get through region by region. This was the Corn Belt Classic, so let's start in Region 4, the Corn Belt. And you said, well, I'll tell you, Kansas and Iowa, Missouri were hot markets to get this thing kicked off.
Yes, they were. It was exciting. Those Kansas steers, 600-pound steers, kind of $4.25, all the way up to $5. 700-pound steers, $3.75 to $4.20, up to $4.30 on a 7-weight steer in Kansas. 800-pound steers, $3.55 to $3.80. We saw a top of $3.86 on an 800-pound steer. 900-pound steers in Kansas, $3.30 up to $3.60, with a high of $3.64 on a lot. And I wrote down just a couple of lots that I thought really grabbed my attention there out of Kansas. Some of the feeder cattle. The Burdett steers were an August delivery steer at 950 pounds at $359.75, and that's totaling $34.17 a head. Just a tremendous market there. Zachary Woods sold a set of September delivery calves, 800 pounds smooth at $387 a pound. And then Harder and Sons, June delivery and upfront delivery feeder steer based at 865 at $379.50. That's $3,280 a head. Just tremendous.
Yeah. Let's jump down into that Region 3 since we're right there. Let's head south there. Of course, that would be Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas there, I think. Is that right? And so let's look at that market there and kind of what were you feeling on that one?
Same. I think the highlight for me on the Region 3 would have been a lot of those feeder cattle. And we knew the feeder market was going to be higher. You know, the board had climbed and just really worked out well for us in timing for the sale. But when we sold those Oklahoma and Texas feeders, and then you talk about New Mexico and Louisiana as well, Arkansas, just a tremendous uptick there. 700-pound steers, $3.60 up to $4. And I think we sold some light, some green grass steers up to $4.40 on a 700-pound steer. 800-pound steer, $3.40 to $3.70 plus. Those 9-weight grass steers, $3.25 up to $3.48. And then the heifer deal really is where I probably was most surprised by the increase there. 700-pound heifer, $3.40 to $3.60 with a high of $3.69. And 800-pound heifers, $3.20 up to $3.45 in that Region 3.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just go to the West Coast now. We'll come back because I know the northern region, or that number 2 region, is kind of a big region, has a lot of states in there, a lot of cattle as well. So, but let's hit that western side of the country, Region 1. Region 1
would have been really, really light tested in this sale.
Yeah.
Would have saw, just a few lots of some feeder cattle there, but 850 to 9-weight feeder steers, bringing kind of in that 375 mark. It really would have been the only test in that market.
Yeah, that with your other sales coming up later on in the summer, that's where we're going to see that region, in addition to probably this northern region. We'll go ahead and have you go through number 2. I'm sure a lot of the, these upcoming sales, top of the Rockies and the Bighorn Classic, those are going to be kind of those sales that we see this number 2 region. But what did we see from any cattle that were in this Corn Belt Classic out of Region 2?
Well, Region 2 is what really gets everybody excited. It's what's most anticipated coming into the Corn Belt, and for right reason, because we usually unleash the beast whenever we start talking about the summer run and the cattle that come out of Region 2. And just a tremendous amount of cattle in that area. 400-pound steers would bring from $5.50 up to $6 plus. 500-pound steers, $4.75 to $5.50, $5.60. We actually had a set of 500-pound steers bring $587.50. Just would have been some fall calves, for balling calves for delivery there in the fall. 600-pound steers bring $4.60 up to $5. You darl those up to the head, that's $2,900 to $3,100 plus a head. Just tremendous, and actually would have knocked on $3,200 a head on several of those. 700-pound steers, $4 up to $4.30. And like we talked about, a lot of those are just balling calves, man. Just tremendously big, good calves. 800-pound steers out of that Region 2 was $370 to $385 with a high of $402. 900-pound steers, $9 to $950, bringing $350 to $356. And those larger steers in the 9-weight sector, $950 up to 1,000 pounds, $340 to $360 plus. Move over into the heifers on the Region 2. 400-pound heifer would bring $520 to $550. That would have been really light tested on a 400-pound heifer. And again, I go back and I tell you, I think it's only because they're just not that they're not that small anymore. You want a 400-pound calf, you're going to have to get her before she turns 60 days old, I think. But did see some bring 557 50 on a 400-pound heifer. 500-pound heifers bring 440 up to $5. 600-pound heifers 375 up to 430. And again, we getting into these fall delivery just balling calves. Did have one really nice set of heifers that probably would have to make replacements in that 6-weight sector. Bring 480 a pound. 700-pound heifers 355 up to $4. 800-pound heifers 345 up to 363. And a lot of those would be grass heifers and spade heifers. So we're getting some really good tickets, but those heifers are going to feed and perform like a steer. So just tremendous prices. And actually saw 900-pound heifers as well out of Region 2, and they bring 320 to 335 with a high of 349 on one set.
All right. We can't go too far. We got to make sure we include everybody. So do you have any highlights out of Region 5 and 6? That'd be the northeast part of the country and the southeast part of the country. I know we got folks that listen in that part of the world, so I don't want to leave them out by no means.
No, we do not want to leave them out because we do trade a tremendous amount of cattle out of Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana. They just do a great job. Genetics has gotten better and better. And we talk about trying to bring calves in here for wheat and then even on into grass. Florida is a huge role player for us there. 700-pound steers there out of Florida, kind of 365 to 370. You'd be light tested on the feeders coming out of that area, but did see some. Then we get down into 650 to 700 pounds. They bring 380 to 415. And then 600 to 650 pounders, kind of 390 to 437, 438, somewhere in there. And again, we talk about these calves getting big. They're doing it in Florida too. They have started growing some calves that will just flat get big for you. So they're shipping a lot of heavy 5 and 6-weight balling calves as well these days. 5-weight steers in Florida kind of bring 425 up to 510. And then we get down into those 4-weights, 400-pound steer calves bring anywhere from kind of 465 up to around 560. And then we would see a few flyweight calves out of that area as well. Some 4-weight calves that bring kind of 550, and some 350 to 4-weight calves that bring mid 6 and 6 to 675 pound.
Billy, I didn't write down every numbers that you were given there, but just from your basis, looking at these markets and kind of knowing that, how far back are we on these heifers? Again, I wasn't writing it down as you were giving those, but in the past we've seen a pretty good discount on these heifers. Is that discount still there, or is it starting to close up a little bit?
It's still there. I would say it's probably there a little larger on the feeders, just because we talk about it. We really separate what a heifer and a steer can do whenever we go back to talking about how we're making these big carcasses. And a heifer just doesn't have that motor. She just can't do that. So we see that spread, I think, bigger in the feeder cattle between a steer and a heifer than we do the calf market, just because these guys, again, we're playing that dollars per head figure, and they want to run some on grass, and they think they're going to give themselves an opportunity of some cheap gains to make that heifer a lot more efficient, over a longer period of time owning her. So that spread's probably around 20, anywhere between $20 and $30 back of those steers when we talk about the calves, and probably closer to 15, and maybe 15 to 20 on a feeder.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about some upcoming sales. I know Week in the Rockies coming up in July, Video Royale, the end of July, and then Bighorn Classic Horse in August. But just kind of go through that and maybe some deadlines if folks are interested.
Yeah, the Week in the Rockies sales coming up July 6th through the 10th here. We're right around the corner. We've actually already met the catalog deadline for that one. I think we've done a little over 250,000 catalog for that sale. Then the next following sale after that will be 2 weeks later, and that'll be the Video Royale. We'll head out to Winnemucca, Nevada for that one. That one's going to be July 27th through the 31st. Catalog deadline for that sale will be July the 10th. Then we will go out to the Bighorn Classic in Sheridan. That sale will be August 17th to the 21st. And the catalog deadline for that one will be July 31st. And then we wrap up back at our home office in Hudson Oaks with our Labor Day sale. It will be a 2-day sale. That sale is in September. It'll be the 2nd and 3rd, and the catalog deadline for that will be August 24th.
All right. Very good. Well, Bailey, I know folks, if they go to the website, superiorlivestock.com, you can see a lot of the results. You can see the country page that you manage there as well, and get these results, kind of look what's going on out there. That's a pretty good resource, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Very, very easy to navigate website that's got a tremendous amount of information on it. Just like you said, you can get on the country page You can click that recently sold lots, and it'll show you some of the lots that we've sold here in the last week or so. Gives you a good idea of some of these cattle that we're pulling forward and some of what we're going to see on these upcoming sales. We get a lot of off-ball on the country page from these auctions. They might have missed a deadline or something. So a lot of what we're going to have in the week of the Rockies or the following sale, we usually have those highlights on the country page a week or two before and a week or two following that sale, just for when they see what that market is, they might not want to wait on that next auction, so they get them listed on there. And you can always get on there and click on auctions and scroll down there in that box to see results and market report. When you click that, it gives you the opportunity to pull up any of our past auctions over the last actually several years. You can pull that out and view the lots and look at those sale prices and results from those past sales as well.
You bet. All right, Bailey, very good to visit with you. Appreciate the information that you gave us throughout our conversation here today. I think understanding some of these fundamentals is good, as many of us are in a spot of looking down the road of starting to make decisions of what we're going to do with these spring-born calves that we've have, or maybe you got some yearling cattle that you're going to be coming off of grass later on and things like that. So good to visit with you on all of that, and hope to catch up with you down the road again too.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin. I appreciate it. We're looking forward to an exciting summer.
You bet. And again, that was Bailey Ballou with Superior Livestock joining us here. Again, that website, superiorlivestock.com. You can go there and find out, watch these sales as they progress through the summer. Go to that country page, see how things are being listed and how they're marketed out there as well. If you're trying to make up your own decisions, that's a good resource for your management decisions. Well, stay with us when we come back. I mentioned it at the front end of the show, and we do have a surprise visit here from the captain himself. He's going to be in here in just a moment for Tim's 2 cents. And of course, we'll also hear later on from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. A lot to come here on the Working Ranch Radio Show, so stay with us.
Horn flies stressing your cattle? Make fly control one and done with Alticid IGR XRB. Alticid IGR XRB delivers season-long hornfly control from a single application bolus, providing up to 195 days of relief regardless of mineral consumption or location. It breaks the hornfly life cycle with no impact on beneficial insects, giving you flexible, consistent control. Learn more at cargillanimalnutrition.com/Alticid bolus.
Well, those of you that have been longtime listeners, and I'm talking longtime listeners of the Working Ranch Radio Show, you know that the Captain Tim O'Byrne, who is editor of the Working Ranch magazine, has always been a part of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And while he doesn't show up every week in Tim's 2 cents, offering his perspective as he will this week, he's always been a part of that. And I kind of coined him, for me personally, as kind of the executive producer, somebody that I bounce ideas off. He's always one sending me ideas for shows as well. So between the two of us, we're able to kind of work through those kinds of things, and also a sounding board for me. So I always appreciate his perspective. And this week, a welcome surprise to have the Captain Tim O'Byrne back for this week's edition of Tim's 2 cents.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. Justin, this Tim's 2 is about you finding Don Day for the program. Now, he's been on for a few years now, and I got to tell you, and I know there's a lot of folks out there that feel the same way as I do, I have learned more about weather than I ever thought I could possibly learn from Don Day. And I find him fascinating. I find him candid. I find him... you got a really good rapport with him. He's really good at filling in the blanks in a way that a guy like me can understand it, because there's a lot of things at play in the weather. It's a very complex, multi-layered element, obviously. And I just really appreciate him being on the show. Back to you in the booth.
All All right. Well, Captain, appreciate that recognition. And I am one that have always been very grateful to have meteorologist Don Day on as a part of our show. For those of you that are regular listeners to the Working Ranch Radio Show since I've been hosting, you know that having the weather outlook has been a part of our show. Part of it stems back to my previous career many, many years ago when I was in ag radio and giving market reports and updates of that nature. But really, when it came down to what people were really wanting to know, while they wanted to know the markets, they really also wanted to know the weather. And so with that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure was really a part of our show, is that weather outlook. And meteorologist Don Day does a great job with that. I'll tell you what, there's none second to him that he has the ability to look ahead and talk about the cause and effect, the relationships of that, how it's affecting different parts of the country, but also the weather almanac knowledge of years ago and how that relates to what we're going to see or could be seeing in upcoming years. So appreciate that. And I guess that's not a better introduction to stick with us, because when we come back after this break, we're going to have meteorologist Don Day in as we take a look at our long-range weather. We'll be back after this.
Fascinated by our wild weather? Now you can learn, appreciate, and understand the weather in your own backyard with the new Tropo Rain Gauge. Having achieved the highest rating of any product reviewed by the WeatherStationExperts.com, the Tropo boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit MeasureRain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to MeasureRain.com.
Today's long-range weather brought to you by long-range epronamectin extended-release dewormer, delivering up to 150 days of parasite protection in just one single dose. Help your herd graze, gain weight without that extra parasite pressure. In fact, there was a study done on yearlings that were treated with long-range, gaining over 23 pounds more per head compared to those treated with generic ivermectin. Bigger gains and stronger returns on sale day. It all starts with long range. You can find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Well, as we turn now and take a look at our long range weather, joining us is meteorologist Don Day. And Don, as we look at our weather, as you and I were talking before we started, it's kind of two different looks that we're going to visit through here today. One is maybe the more near term, the 7 day out prior to the 4th of July, and then you're going to start to see a shift after that. So let's focus first of all what we're going to see in this upcoming week, because we still see a lot of cool weather in certain portions, definitely some high heat in other areas, but kind of explain what you see happening.
For the last few weeks, we've definitely had a pattern east of the Rockies, especially in the central part of the U.S. It's been rather cool and rather wet. We had a tropical storm go across the Gulf that has helped alleviate drought conditions in the deep south some more. But we've also seen temperatures that have been a lot more like spring than early summer in the nation's midsection, while it's been hot and dry in the desert states and into California and the Pacific Northwest. We're going to see this pattern essentially stay the same for a little bit longer, but there's kind of a pattern change that we see developing that's going to be really interesting, because here over the next week, we're going to be talking about potentially snow again in the high mountains of Montana, Idaho, and northwestern Wyoming later this weekend into early next week, with some unseasonably cold weather coming into that part of the country. We could even see temperatures go below average into Las Vegas, even into Southern California and Arizona. But what that's going to do is that's going to reverse the trend of the coolness in the Midwest and the Corn Belt. So they're going to see something that they've kind of been wanting, some heat to make the corn grow. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to see that dynamic here over the next 7 weeks, to where it's going to get colder in the west and warmer in the central and the east.
Okay. So then that brings us then to the next thing. And I know that's something that you talk about, continue to talk about in your weather podcast, is, that monsoon action starting to take place. As we start to look past this 4th of July, what do you anticipate with that?
Well, the monsoon so far has been called the no-soon.
Yeah.
It just has not been able to come up out of Central America and Mexico. And with just a few minor exceptions, we have really seen very little here all the way through the end of June of monsoon activity. And usually by the middle of June, it's in place. But the reason we haven't seen that monsoon get started yet is this very strong jet stream wind that's been across the North American region. It's been suppressing the monsoon, and the storm that's coming into the Northern Rockies and the Pacific Northwest that's bringing that cold weather is one reason for that. But what we see developing around the 4th of July and afterwards is that instead of these storms dropping out of Canada into the lower 48, which they've been doing, they're going to stall out along the west coast and off the west coast of British Columbia, which is kind of what we see when we see a summer pattern establishing. So if you get a low pressure that's going to be more off of the west coast, then you see high pressure developing in the central United States. If you take the clockwise circulation around that high in the central United States, the counterclockwise circulation of the low off the west coast, and you start to see that set up and kind of sit there for several days and weeks, that acts as a pump to bring warmer air into the U.S., but also higher humidity air into the United States. So what that may do is initiate that flow of moisture out of Mexico and Central America into the desert Southwest, the central and southern Rockies, and then that moisture then rotates around that high into the Corn Belt and Midwest. So you get that summer heat in the Midwest, but you also bring in higher humidity air as well.
Mm-hmm. So how does that correlate then to now, as you had said, we've been real delayed in our normal weather pattern. We've got an El Nino taking shape or is in place now. And as we start to see with now that high that's been really affecting the cold temperatures out of Canada, as we start to slip into maybe a normal summer mode, do you feel like we're kind of getting back into what was expected?
Yeah, I do. And what we may see in the month of July is kind of what we were expecting your normal June pattern to be like. With this establishment of the central U.S. high and this low off the west coast, we may actually start to feel some of the extra humidity that's not only coming up from Mexico and South America, but from the Pacific with this El Nino, because quite honestly, even though this El Nino is well established and it's in place and it's been highly publicized, we really haven't seen any El Nino impacts. And that's because the northern jet stream's been dominating so much. So if we see less dominant up north, that should allow some of these El Nino impacts to come in. That's why there is a possibility that the script could get flipped a little bit, that some of the very dry areas, and if you look at the drought monitor, boy, it looks like someone spilled a can of red paint over a good part of the western United States, that there might be some help coming in some of those drought areas with this influx of moisture, which has basically been held at bay. It's been down there, but it hasn't had a chance to come north, and we see that possibly happening as we get into July.
Okay. All right. One final question. We're going to kind of slip back into that 7 to 10 day mode. Biggest winner, biggest loser. And I'm talking from an ag perspective, not from the everyday guy wanting to be out in the park and enjoying a nice, beautiful day. I'm talking from an ag perspective, which of course usually means precipitation. But from a 7 to 10 day outlook, biggest winner, biggest loser parts of the country.
Well, the biggest winners with precipitation will be the northern Rockies and southwest Canada, going to get another good shot of moisture. The losers would still be parts of the central and southern Rockies and the Great Basin states that are fighting wildfires right now, and they're going to get a bunch of wind, which is, I think we've got in the next 5 to 7 days some critical wildfire conditions west of the Continental Divide that will get worse before they'll get better.
All right. Well, Don, good to visit with you. I know you're taking a few days off on assignment, so good luck on that assignment, and we look forward to catching up with you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
You bet. And again, that was meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-range weather. You can tune in each and every morning to his daily video podcast. You can find a link to that YouTube channel by going to dayweather.com. Today's long-range weather brought to you by Long Range Cattle Dewormer. Find out more at longrangedewormer.com. Coming up on next week's edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show, Jared Wareham will be back with us. Now, he is one of these that's kind of on the cusp of the latest things happening in the ag technology space, so he will be joining us, and also with him will be Chelsea Good, so be sure to tune in next week. Also a show that we're working on. It's a bit controversial, but I'm trying to find more of an unbiased person to be our guest on it, and that is on the topic of data centers. I know that's something that a lot of us have questions about, so trying to flush some of that out and hope to have it on you for an upcoming edition of the Working Ranch Radio Show. By the way, if you have ideas for show topics, you can send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Well, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. Thanks for joining us. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.